How's the sound there? A bit better, yep. We wait for McMahon.
Just wait a couple of minutes.
We might get started. So welcome to the special meeting of the Toowoomba Regional Council. So this meeting, as you was aware, is open to the public and will be live streamed. I'd like to thank all of you who are here in this room today and acknowledge everyone is watching on the live stream. So I'd like to acknowledge the Mayor, the Deputy Mayor, Planning and Development Portfolio Leader, Councillor Bill Carl, other councillors, our CEO Brian Pidgeon, General Manager of Planning and Development Stuart Summers, other council staff and members of the press and the community who are here in attendance today. So I'd like to open the meeting by acknowledging the traditional owners. I acknowledge the Aboriginal parties whose songlines traverse these lands we meet on today, the Western Waka Waka, Guyabal and Jarrawa peoples, and pay our respects to their elders past, present and emerging. And it's a special acknowledgement today as it's the 20th anniversary of National Reconciliation Week. So we have one item, actually I'd like to call for any apologies. We don't have any apologies today. We have one item on the agenda and that is the item number 4, the assessment of change representations for a development permit for material change of use. So we'll have the planner speak to it and then afterwards we have 2 people here and I will call on you if you want to address the councillors after that. Thank you. Thank you, Peter.
Madam Chair, if I could...
Oh, beg your pardon.
Suspend.
One critical thing. I'd like to have someone move that we suspend standing orders to have the discussion. Have a mover, Councillor Antonio and Councillor Shine. All those in favour? Carried. Thank you, Peter. False start.
So if we could please have attachment 1 up, Wendy. Good afternoon, councillors, fellow officers and members of the public. The report before you considers change representations regarding the conditions of a development approval for a development permit for a material change of use for high impact industry located at 1 Mary Street, Clifton. And that's the site there. The Clifton CBD is approximately a kilometre to the north. The approved development is located within the low impact industry zone. The existing high impact industry on the site has been operating for approximately 24 years. In November 2018, following a compliance investigation undertaken by council, the landowner was made aware that there did not appear to be a use approval for the existing use of the site. In response, on the 5th of April 2019, a development application was made by Ridley Agri Products for a development permit for a material change of use for high impact industry for grain processing. That was made under the Planning Act 2016. The development application sought to make lawful the existing high impact industry use of the site, and the development application was approved by council with conditions at a special meeting of council on the 5th of February 2020. The development application was subject to impact assessment. 1 properly made submission was received opposing the development, and 4 properly made submissions were received supporting the development. The submission opposing the development generally relates to alleged environmental nuisance from the existing site operations and contravention of an existing approval. Submissions in support of the proposed approved development generally relate to the contribution of the mill to economic activity within the town. If we could please have attachment 3 up, Wendy, and the last page of that. So the approved development includes existing buildings and ancillary structures with a total gross floor area of 1,893 square metres as identified on the plans there. Operating hours of 24 hours per day, 7 days per week, except public holidays. 12 on-site visitor car parking spaces. Approximately 28 B-double truck movements per day. 16 full-time equivalent staff, and entry and exit from the site via King Street. So the applicant's change representations were received by Council on the 19th of March 2020. The change representation sought to change the conditions of approval. Specifically, conditions 1.1 and 1.2. Condition 1.1 places a maximum throughput threshold on the activity of 600 tonnes per day. And condition 1.2 states that the approved use must not operate on public holidays. The applicant proposes that no maximum production threshold be placed on the site operations, and that the site operate from 10 p.m. on public holidays on days where the public holiday precedes a normal production day. The applicant also made representations in regards to conditions 38 and 39 relating to external roadworks required to the King Street frontage. Now, those conditions require King Street to be widened, to fully seal the verge fronting the site, and curb and channelling where required to council standards. Now, those conditions were imposed to maintain the integrity of council's infrastructure within the road reserve and to maintain the safety and efficiency of the operation of King Street. I'll go into a bit more of detail of that later. If we could go to attachment 4 on the last page of attachment 4, I'll show you what the applicant proposes there. So the applicant proposes to only seal the south of this southern vehicle crossover to the William Street corner, reinstall the verge in this location and curb and channel as required. There's currently damaged curb and channel there, and the verge is currently damaged, likely from vehicles accessing the verge. And place no parking signs there. And there's also an additional truck standing area internal to the site. The applicant also proposes that the works be undertaken over a 3-year period rather than the 9 months currently required by the conditions of approval.
Excuse me, Madam Chair, could you just show us where the internal truck parking is? I don't think the
there is another plan.
Working properly. I don't think.
It's that red area to the south of the development there. There is another plan in there, but that's okay.
I don't think the lasers work.
Yeah, it's that red area to the right, okay. Highlighted internal to the site there. Yeah. And lastly, the applicant made representations in regards to condition 43. Condition 43 relates to the allowable hours for service vehicles to the site. Currently, those hours are 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. for incoming vehicles and 5 a.m. to 10 p.m. for outgoing vehicles. The applicant proposes to extend the hours for incoming service vehicles and requests no restriction on hours for outgoing vehicles. The applicant also made a number of general representations regarding the development approval. These representations were generally related to matters such as COVID-19, further contextualisation of the operation of the business, and the economic contribution of the mill to the Clifton community. Now, a detailed assessment of the representations is within the report. However, I'll just summarise them here. In relation to the representations regarding the intensity of the use and the maximum throughput of 600 tonnes per day, the removal of that condition is not supported by council officers. The impact of the proposed development with regard to traffic, air, noise and other impacts were considered on the basis of the use having a throughput of 600 tonnes per day. And that was stated in the town planning report that was submitted with the development application. Information provided by the applicant in October 2019 stated the mill is currently operating at between 400 and 450 tonnes per day. It is noted that at this intensity, the mill may be causing environmental nuisance as defined by the Environmental Protection Act 1994. And that's demonstrated in part by information provided by the applicant during assessment of the development application, primarily a noise impact assessment. Consequently, the development approval contains conditions that require the operator to implement site and operational changes over a period of time to achieve compliance with the relevant standards, while still allowing for fluctuations in demand for the products the mill produces. It is also considered that where the operator wishes to increase the intensity of the approved use in the future, a change application may be made under the provisions of the Planning Act, and that would be assessed on its merits at the time the application was made. In regards to condition 1.2 and the proposal to operate on public holidays that precede a normal production day, it is acknowledged that where a normal production day falls after a public holiday, the approved use may need to commence operations at 10 p.m. the preceding day to enable normal operation. However, as noted previously, the existing mill operations are potentially currently causing environmental nuisance, and the mill is approved to operate for 24 hours a day where not a public holiday in the conditions of approval. It is considered reasonable to allow the use to operate from 10 p.m. on a public holiday, only where the public holiday falls before a day that is not a public holiday, not where before a normal production day. It is acknowledged this may result in the operator needing to introduce operational changes at times like Easter. However, this requirement is consistent across all industries. In regards to conditions 38 and 39 and the external roadworks, no change to these conditions is recommended within the report. It is acknowledged the additional on-site truck parking space proposed by the applicant in the change representations may improve traffic flow through the site and provides additional on-site standing area for heavy vehicles. However, the proposal to include additional internal manoeuvring area does not demonstrate that the approved use will protect or improve the function, safety and efficiency of the transport network or maintain the integrity of council's infrastructure within the road reserve. And moreover, the requirement for the use to minimise the potential for dust nuisance is required to be addressed with relative immediacy. And the works required by the conditions are external to the site, and as such it is considered that any disruption to the operation of the use caused by the construction of these works could be minimised and managed appropriately. In regards to condition 43 and the proposed changes to the service vehicle hours, the material submitted with the development application, namely the noise impact assessment which I mentioned earlier, indicated that the traffic generated by the development was a potential source of noise nuisance in the locality. The noise impact assessment submitted by the applicant concluded that the noise exceedances at sensitive receptors were a result of both continuous noise from the mill and variable noise from traffic movements, and that it was impractical to mitigate one aspect of the noise source without mitigating the other. The report also noted the exceedances of the relevant noise criteria at sensitive receptors were severe, in the range of 14 to 31 decibels, depending on the time of day and the nature of the noise source. In this context, it is considered that the proposed change to allow outgoing vehicles to operate 24 hours a day would prohibit the operator achieving compliance with the conditions of development approval, specifically conditions 44 and 49 as they relate to noise limits for the use. However, it is considered reasonable to allow service vehicles for incoming goods to access the site from 5 a.m. to 10 p.m, given that service vehicles for outgoing goods will already be accessing the site during this period. This will provide more flexibility for the operator, and in this scenario, no service vehicles will be accessing the site between the hours of 10 p.m. and 5 a.m. In summary, the change representations have been assessed with regards to the applicable assessment framework, and it is recommended that the proposed changes be approved in part as identified within the recommendation.
Questions, councillors? Anyone have any questions? Councillor Summerfield?
Thank you. I note the change in hours from the agreed hours previously of 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. And in line with the noise issues, I'm just wondering if you're going to make it from 5 a.m. to 10 p.m, how is the applicant planning on managing the noise from those vehicles coming in and out 10 p.m. in a low to medium density residential area? I'm just wondering what the plans are, and the noise attenuation plan that you have in here, will that cover off on the noise of trucks going in and out up till 10 p.m. at night and as early as 5 a.m. in the morning?
So as stated earlier, the approved development is within a low impact industry zone. Now there is sensitive receptors nearby, both to the southwest and to the east and the west, essentially. The sensitive receptors to the west are also located within the low impact industry zone. Now that doesn't mean that those uses need to put up with noise nuisance. Now, the change to vehicle hours is, the conditions of approval require that the applicant provide a plan to meet the relevant noise criteria over time. And as you might remember from the meeting on the 5th of February, that time frame is 3 years. That includes implementation of the works to mitigate the noise from the mill, as well as measurements of noise from the use overall on a 12-monthly basis to report on that. Now, if we are still seeing exceedances of the relevant noise criteria after 3 years during the hours you talk about, and the hours are most likely to be from 5 a.m. to 7 a.m. because that's the nighttime period for the Environmental Protection Act and where it crosses over for different noise criteria. So you quite rightly point out that that's a risk. But where the operator is not meeting the relevant noise criteria after that 3-year period, they will have to introduce operational changes to meet those criteria, because meeting those criteria is a condition of development approval.
Thanks, Peter.
Any other questions or queries, Councillor Carol Taylor?
Chair, 3 years is a long time if the noise is becoming an issue. 3 years to attenuate that. Is that a normal time that's put aside?
There's not a lot normal about this application. Now, the program of works would be done on a hierarchy. The condition is such, and the noise report approved and the noise control plan approved states that hierarchy. Now, we are expected, if that hierarchy is followed and the most important works that will achieve the best results are done within that first 12-month period, we would expect to see significant acoustic benefits as a result of those works within the first 12-month period. So it's a staged approach. So the severity of the exceedances after 12 months should theoretically be a lot less.
Be eased.
Yeah.
A follow-up, if I may, and we are confident that the adjusted road works are going to stop a lot of the dust that comes from there?
The conditioned roadworks, if we could go to, I think it's attachment 7. It's the aerial of the King Street Verge, Wendy. So, as you can see, as you can see, it appears vehicles have been moving on the verge here. A site inspection by council officers and council engineers indicates there's some damage to the curb and channelling in that location from vehicles, potentially from vehicles crossing the verge. I didn't witness any myself. But what the conditioned roadworks do, and they're conditioned to be undertaken within 9 months from the development approval taking effect, is seal all of that verge there essentially. Have a V drain here, a trafficable V drain for the drainage, and that should stop a lot of the wheel generated dust from the front of the site here. Condition 37 of the approval also requires internal manoeuvring areas to be sealed.
I suppose, I do apologise, that's actually what I meant. The internal is where I believe, Madam Chair, that most of the dust is coming.
Yeah. So there was no representations made regarding the condition 37 as it relates to the sealing of internal manoeuvring areas.
Thank you.
Yeah. And they're conditioned to be sealed within 9 months as well.
Thank you.
Was there any other questions or queries? Councillor Carl?
Yeah, through you, Chair. My concern is when you talk about receptors, I get the locality that you refer to, they're close receptors, but if in fact those hours of operation are extended for incoming and outgoing vehicles, wouldn't it be reasonably understood that people in residential areas from whichever direction trucks leave this site will be affected between 5 a.m. and 10 p.m. And that's, we can see the close receptors there, but in effect, any way that a truck leaves this site, there is effectively receptors along residential streets in Clifton.
So the King Street here is an approved B-double route. So it's an approved B-double route by the Department of Transport and Main Roads. And the B-double route actually comes down King Street here and goes up Mary Street. There's been a few reconfigurations of a lot here over time. So all traffic, and all B-double traffic in particular, is required to use King Street. So there are receptors, you quite rightly point out, Councillor. There's receptors along King Street. Here, they're existing dwelling houses. And the other receptors closest to the activity are here to the east. You could expect some noise of vehicles passing by. Primarily, vehicle noise, or the loudest vehicle noises, are those commencement of vehicle revving and acceleration. Most of the traffic will leave via this, or one of these two crossovers here. You would expect by the time they're getting up to the houses at the north there, where some of the acceleration would have.
So well, let me take it a little bit further. A fully loaded grain truck in a residential area leaving the site, heading to the New England Highway, I would imagine. I'm not a qualified truck driver these days, but you would be going through a few gears with a heavily laden truck in a residential area that is further afield than what you talk about. So that's the concern I have, is the overall impacts of increased activity with the spread of further operating hours that potentially affects a lot of other people. This
was considered in detail. There's a number of scenarios. It may actually result in the activity or the high intensity activity being spread out. In that the incoming vehicles have more time to get to the site, so there mightn't be traffic jams, so to speak, where there's a number of vehicles, some even waiting on the road. So there is a number of scenarios how it may play out. The conditions currently allow vehicles coming from the site to leave at 5 a.m. Now, those vehicles have to get there somehow in the first place as well, so that they're going to be driving to the site to leave at 5 a.m. via an approved B double route.
That's fine, but, so am I to understand that a B double route has 24/7 hours of operation with no noise restrictions through a residential area?
No, that's not the case.
That's why I'm concerned, because this is in a medium impact industry area, maybe high impact, yep. But do we wait for residents to complain about increased traffic noise on their street before we actually can take some sort of corrective measure, as you say, to spread activity out, or we already know they'll have trouble meeting the noise restrictions?
So currently, the site, as I mentioned earlier, the site has been operating for 24 years, unlawfully, it seems, without the use approval. During that time, and most recently, there have been no restrictions on the service vehicles coming to and from the site. As far as I'm aware, Council has received one complaint in that time regarding, well, several complaints, but from one complainant in particular, regarding noise from the site. I think there's, and this, again, it doesn't justify subjecting people to noise nuisance, but there is the Grainco site to the north. So this is owned by Grainco. That currently operates. They will have, and that's an agricultural use. They will have service vehicles, B double vehicles, accessing that site at all hours of the morning during harvest time, I imagine, as well. I think there's some, not expectation, but acceptance of people living in that area that there is that activity. It's a rural area. It's a rural district town and centre of activity. So the conditions of approval, as imposed through the development approval, are improving the current situation.
Councillor Carol Taylor again.
Sorry, I did ask, I think at the original time, on the zoning map, there's two different colours of pink. Can you tell me what they are? And the next one down, Wendy?
The next one there.
And I just wondered what they were. I think I asked this originally. It is interesting, though, to have low to medium density around a B double route, and I understand. I come from the country, so I understand the jobs that this provides and other things, but there certainly is a conflict there for the future, I think, with that land. It's marked medium to low. What is the buff colour, the different pink colour? Is that supposedly the same? Is that low to medium density, or is that, what is that?
No, that's
The one over around the facility.
Oh, that's low impact industry zone.
Low impacts in industry. Thank you very much. It's not marked in there. I think I asked that last time.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you.
Yeah, sorry.
Councillor Summerfield.
Thank you. That was my confusion as well too, Peter, with the thing. But getting back to what Councillor Bill was saying, the noise from trucks at night is noisier. Whether it be early morning or late at night, it's always much noisier because of the quiet and the change in atmosphere, the air and whatever. And also the current residents are tolerant, I get that, and we are very respectful of the fact that this is a good employment for Clifton, but the current residents won't always be there, and this is our one opportunity to ensure that we're providing the best outcome we can for the whole of the area, which has to be weighed up with great employment versus the impact on those living around it. So I just think we have to be careful in ensuring that we're making the most of this opportunity to get everything right.
Thank you. Councillor Carl, do you have another question?
Just a comment, if I may, Madam Chair, further to Councillor Summerfield's thing. These are the reasons why I raise it. It's not now, it's in the future. And I live in a community that experiences growth, and I've watched this work in reverse for primary industries in the area with encroachment. And this is where land use conflicts come into play. It's not now, it's in 10, 15, 20 years' time, and it's really hard to undo. I know we're considering the application now, and I agree with Councillor Summerfield. It is an opportunity to make sure we can get it as right as we can. Understand the importance of this industry to this community. Understand all of those issues, but we are now in 2020 and we need to play by the same rules under a planning scheme. I do have some reservations about extending those hours.
Thanks, Councillor Carl. So we've got two presenters here this afternoon. I'll allow you each 5 minutes to present to the councillors. So we have a submitter, Mr. May. Would you like to present to the councillors this afternoon? You'll need to come up near a microphone. We might get you to come up this way. Yep, you can come around that side.
Thank you very much for allowing me to do this. Oops. My workshop has been there since 1996. Those houses have been there in the low impact industrial zone. They've been there well over 60 years, 70 years, whatever. The council, the Clifton Council at that time, when the mill was proposed, it was proposed by originally Keffin Stud, which was owned by Ian Jones. In the end of it all was they moved farm stock from Highfields to Clifton. Because the silos were there, they decided they would, Ian backed out and he sold his share in it because they weren't doing it the way he wanted to. Farm Stock and Grain Co originally built that mill. The mill wasn't built to specifications to start with, i.e. the outgoing load-out bays had to be fully enclosed. The intake bays were designed for a single axle trailer, or just a semi. The doors on those intakes were supposed to be closed while all unloading was done. The same thing with the outloading. Not done. We have at the moment, currently, we have semi-trailers, and I did send to the original council before the February the 5th special meeting. I did send people the USB which showed the dust coming from this place going over houses, trucks packed 3 deep on the footpath. I also have a photo which I forwarded to the Main Roads Department and the police. There was a young boy riding his push bike home from school, and I managed to get a photo of this because I knew nobody believed me. I'd come out of my workshop and I saw this young fella coming up the street, a B-double roaring off the weighbridge there at Ridley's, tore around across King Street, and this young fella saw him coming and panicked. He could not get onto the footpath because there were 3 B-doubles parked there. And I'm sure to this day that bloke never saw that young fella on his push bike. He then panicked, tried to cross the road to get on the footpath on the other side, and a truck coming out of the Mary Street entrance of this mill nearly cleaned him up. As I was running, because I thought he was going to be hit, I took photos with my camera. Now, this is what's been going on. They do not tarp their loads on the finished product. I have videos of finished product as those vehicles come off that weighbridge going over houses. Now, these people, not only are they being affected by the grain dust, they are also being affected by the noise, as Mr. Cale stated. Now, there is 30 other people employed in that area, okay? With the noise, we are all, it's irrespective of whether we live there, we are entitled to a dust-free, noise-controlled environment. At the present moment, we are not. The mill is now proposing, it's not that they haven't been doing it anyway, that they want to continue operating 7 days a week. Now, I noticed on this attachment 7, which was the photo of that particular area, in the low-density residential zone, there is already another new home being built. So the photos are out of date. But these people, there is no respite from the noise or the dust from this mill. So people who live in this area have sleep deprivation, as long as other concerns about what's in the dust that's coming from this place. Now, the road dust is if I would like people to, respectfully, to read my submission, and it will give you a proper idea of exactly what was proposed in the first place.
Mr.
Now,
May, I might stop you there if I can.
Okay, that's all right.
Yeah, you're
Yep.
pretty much wrapped up there.
No, that's all right.
Make any final points, or are you okay?
No, I'd just like
stay
to.
there while gone.
I'd just like to state that at 9:30 on a Sunday night, the noise from that mill is just ridiculous. And at night time in the local town, it can be heard 3-4 blocks away, probably. And there, on all those B-double routes, there are schools.
Okay.
Thank you for the...
Just stay there for a second, just in case anyone's got any questions. Thank you for your presentation. Anyone have any questions for Mr. May? No? Councillor Carol Taylor?
Question, but I guess that the difference in hours, summer and winter, makes an enormous difference, really, because 5 o'clock is pitch black these days, and I guess the hours at that hour and even into the winter at night time, 10 o'clock, is quite late. So in the summer, I don't think it impacts as much on the people's lives, but so your major concern, Mr. May, is the dust followed by the noise?
The health of people in that area. Now, it was stated that there was only one complaint made, but we did forward to council. There was 9 statements signed by residents in that area that they had attended a meeting with Ridley's Agri Products on the 13th of April at 3 o'clock, 2018. They were not going 24 hours a day then, they were sneaking trucks in and unloading. After that happened, it was 24/7. We then forwarded, we met with them first before we went to the council because we understand that people have to work. We also understand that, but to be treated the way we were, I don't think the people who were involved are in agreement with any of what Ridley's done there.
All right, that might be a good opportunity.
thank
Thank
you.
you very much. Yeah.
you very much.
Now, we have the applicant, Mr Craig Fisher, who is the representative from Ridley's, here to speak to us as well. Thank you. Good. I'll put the timer on you.
Yeah, thank you. I may go over. Your Worship, Councillors, thank you very much for this opportunity to come and present our situation. I'd just like to say Peter did very eloquently put our position up and why the development application and the conditions that are there. We spoke about condition 1.1, condition 43 and condition 38. The three areas that we'd like to put forward today is the areas that we would like to, again, have Council consider in line with our representations that came through. So when we look at condition 1.1, the business has been operating as it is for 24 years, and the condition 1.1 is a condition of growth within the business and prevention of growth within the business to only doing 600 tonne a day. The business within the footprint that it's got has the opportunity to grow more than that and has been designed to do more than that to help support the growth within our customer base in the area. So we would like to look at Council being able to relax that and a little bit to allow us to do some extra volume to allow our business to grow and to succeed and prosper into the future. In line with that, we talk about the operating hours, which is an area of contention. We are currently operating 24/5 and have been for quite a number of years, doing up to 600 tonne a day. We propose that we would like to have transportation of pickups, which is the outgoing feed, as well as our incoming product to be available to come in 24 hours a day. Understanding and our representation is that we would very happily relax the incoming goods to a lesser hours, 6 to 6 or something like that, to ensure that there are less truck movements occurring in that area outside what would be considered the normal. Okay, so in saying that, just a bit of an explanation as to our business. We currently employ 14 people, and those 14 people are local people. That's around about $800,000 worth of wages going into the local area. In line with that, and to support that, there are 12 truck drivers, also local drivers, whose wages are going into the area. We supply feed, and we're talking food, to around about 2 million chickens, be they broiler, breeder chickens, in the local area. Those local farms employ 82 people. And so it's not a small business sitting in King Street. We are a good-sized business. And in saying that, we do understand that there are requirements as set around the DA. And we're happy to comply with those in the most part. However, there are a few things that we would like to be able to do to ensure that we have a sustainable business into the future. As I said earlier, that is in relation to the amount of product that we can manufacture and sell, the hours of operation for the trucks to come in and out, both for pickups and for deliveries. And one of the reasons for that is that the business itself supplies two different types of bird, breeder and broiler. The breeder birds require a different diet, and that diet has to be made separate to the breeder diet. And we have on site 108 tonne of storage for that breeder work. So we commence work at 10 o'clock of a Sunday night, as Russell pointed out. We commence work at 10 o'clock of a Sunday night, and we have trucks coming through the business starting at around about 2 o'clock in the morning, pardon me. And we only have the capacity to be able to deliver to those farms at certain intervals to meet the requirements of those birds. So that is one of the reasons for why we're looking at that. With condition 38 and 39, we're seeking an extension of time to be able to address the conditions that have been put against the DA. As I said, in most part, we agree, but with a 9-month time frame, it's just very difficult to be able to logistically plan it around a business that's been already in operation. It's not a new development. A new development would probably also have issues being able to deal with the conditions in a 9-month period. However, we do want to fix up those items and are requesting a 3-year period, as outlined by Peter previously. A 3-year period to do it over 3 financial years to assist with the economic activities of the business and also then to make the changes that are necessary.
You're going, you're nearly finished up there?
I'm nearly
Do the same
finished.
for you, the 5 minutes, yeah.
Look, I understand that. Thank you very much, Councillor. Look, what we're asking for is Council's consideration to ensuring that we have an ongoing business supporting the community in the way that we do, and us understanding that we do require change within the business. Clifton Shire Council 20, 30 years ago is very different to what we should be dealing with now. We do understand that, and what we're, as I said, just in summary, we're looking for a change in the working hours, a relaxation in the time frame required, and the ability to grow our business in the area. So thank you very much,
Thanks,
Councillor.
Mr Fisher. Questions, councillors? Councillor Carroll-Taylor.
Madam Chair, if you had more storage on the site, would you better be able to provide, have a supply of food without having longer hours?
Look, that is a possibility, yes. Yes. The footprint within the site, as you can see from the attachments, that there is room. That does come at a capital cost and would also have to be figured into the ability of the business to afford that over time.
Thank you.
Councillor Tim McMahon.
Thank you, Chair. Mr Fisher, I'm just wondering, the condition 1.2 about the public holiday opening on the 10 o'clock, where the preceding day is a normal work day, and you've said in your submission it's for RSPCA reasons. Could you just, I didn't understand what that was about.
Yeah, it was actually for animal welfare. We are a provider of feed to living beings that have dietary habits and so forth that need to be met. So given the fact that, as I said earlier, we have 108 tonne of storage and we have to produce the breeder feed at a separate time to the broiler feed to get away from any cross-contamination potential. So we do that. We start at 10 o'clock at night so that we can deliver then on the start of the week to the breeder farms, of which there's 500,000 birds that are relying on this feed. And as I said, they have eating habits where they need to be fed at regular intervals. So I hope that answers your question.
Thanks.
Councillor McDonald. James.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks, Mr Fisher. Probably just a broader question first in regard to COVID-19 and how that may have impacted your business and perhaps what the short to medium term future might hold.
Okay. Yeah, certainly, Councillor. We're a business that feeds people. Our end user is a chicken, but we feed people. And as we know, with COVID, there has been a significant change in the way that we have been procuring our food. Less takeaway. We've seen McDonald's, who are one of our customers, reduce their requirements by 87% because of the particular restaurants not being in operation and things like that. So we've been reasonably fortunate up until now, where the demand for chicken has been taken from the fast food outlets through to the Woolworths and Coles and the home demand market. We are now seeing a drop-off in demand, and that's because, again, the people's habits have changed. We're slowly seeing people starting to buy a little bit more out of the takeaway areas. However, through that process, there has been a glut, and a lot of the supply chain is full, and now that's starting to level out, and we will see a reduction in volume for the short term.
Just to follow up, if I could, just in terms of employment for the organisation, has there been any downturn, or has it still remained the same level of employed people?
No, same level of employment has been maintained throughout.
Okay. Councillor O'Shea.
Yeah, thanks, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr Fisher. I guess my question, I just wondered if you could explain us or talk us through the comment made before from Mr May was around obviously residents deserve to have a dust-free, noise-controlled environment.
Yes.
When you speak about there are a couple of those conditions that you guys would like relaxed or altered, or just how do you propose to, just talk us through how you propose to control dust, control...
Yeah, can I just say, we have no intent to get relaxation on those items. You know, they are still within the DA approval. What we're asking for is an extension of time to complete what we need to complete. So it's not that we're relaxing the requirements of the DA in line with dust and noise. Okay,
well, apologies, could you just talk us through what processes you've put in place to...
We've started the processes already, knowing that we're going to have to address them. So we're looking at where we're getting our raw materials in, for instance. We've done 2 projects in the last few months. One is when we've moved our liquids intake, which is one of the sheds which is located right on the front of, on the road frontage at King Street. It used to have its intake right at the front of that building. We've moved that around the back, again to get away from any noise on that particular street frontage. That, you know, with trucks, drivers coming in and out of trucks and pumps working and all of that sort of thing right on King Street, we've moved that around the back. We've invested in a new compressor, a new state-of-the-art compressor, which is a silent compressor, and it used to be on the southern side of the business and had an effect on the noise coming out of that southern end. So now it's been closed off and is silent. So we're going to address all of those things within the business that are noise generators with the aim of reducing the noise that we currently have.
That answers your question, Councillor O'Shea, yeah. Councillor Melissa Taylor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr Fisher. One of my questions was answered through Councillor O'Shea, but probably my biggest concern is what was raised by Mr May, and thank you for your presentation too, was really the concern of trucks being parked on the footpath and with houses being built there, children are going to be on the road with their push bikes. How, you know, with this new application being, if it is approved, how will that change that situation with trucks being parked?
As advised by Peter on the slides that he had up earlier, what we're proposing is that we have an internal truck parking bay so that all of the trucks can come in and park there, whether they're incoming or outgoing, any time of the day that's allowable. And then the only traffic going out onto King Street will be when they come in and when they come out. It won't be any of this moving around or staying on the street and things like that. There will be a truck parking bay allowed.
Thank you. I just want to clarify that internal parking would alleviate all of that. Yeah. Yes, okay. Thank you.
Councillor Carol Taylor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr Fisher. Just a question on the limit of 600 tonnes of material per day, doing 450 now. That leaves an increase of 25% that is, you know, you could grow by 25% and still be under the 600 or make the goal of 600. So why would you be asking for more?
When the 450 was at the point in time when the development application was first mooted. We're actually doing around about on average 580 tonne a day at the moment.
Councillor Summerfield.
Thank you. Just in relation to the 600 tonne, is that what you had on your development application?
That is correct, yes.
So that would actually change the development application. You would have to go through a whole new process because you would need to meet the requirements of the additional production. So I would seek advice from the staff and what that would entail, because you can't be putting an application in for 600 but then expecting us to.
Totally understand that situation, yes. Yeah.
Did you want to comment now, Councillor Summerfield? Peter, is that?
Maybe wait until Mr Fisher's left, so that in the interest of resolution.
Sure. Is there any other further questions? We might move to your answer. Thanks, Peter. Thank you, Mr Fisher. Thank you, Daniel.
Councillors, in response to Councillor Summerfield's question, the view of officers would be that the application was lodged with a statement in the reports that the output was 600 tonnes. If there was a proposal to increase that quantum, then that could have a whole myriad of impacts through traffic movement. So they've indicated a certain number of truck B-double movements and employees. If suddenly production is increased, then that could have a whole myriad of impacts, not only with traffic, dust, acoustics, everything. So if there was a proposal to increase the volume, in our opinion, it would probably constitute what we would call a change other to the current approval, which would mean a further application process which would need to go through a public notification process and then a decision process. So council would get to see that again. We would have a concern if there was a proposal through this negotiated decision process to, remove any limitations on that, because the assessment was done on the assumption of 600 tonnes.
Thank you. Thank you.
Madam Chair,
Yes, Councillor McDonald.
apologies, but I did have another question actually for Mr Fisher. That was around the timing of operation. From the suggestion on the submission was to, or from the applicant I should say, was around an option of having incoming from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. And in the officer's recommendations 5 to 10 incoming and outgoing. And I believe, I'd just like to know from an operation of the organisation why it would be suggested that you go 6 a.m. to 6 p.m, but then outgoing vehicles could, the request is for 24 hours, outgoing vehicles.
Well, probably if you come up to this microphone just up here. Thank you.
Apologies for that, but I think it's an important part of what the request was. I just wanted to understand why it was.
Thank you, Councillor. The proposal that we put forward was that we can manage incoming vehicles between the hours of 6 a.m. and 6 p.m. And would offset the potential for further vehicles between the hours of 6 p.m. and 6 a.m. As I explained earlier, the need for truck movements for outgoing product 24 hours a day for the 5 days a week, we can offset the amount of truck movements outside those hours by managing our incoming goods. It's much easier for us to manage incoming goods within those hours, and it is possible to be done.
So just a clarification there. So you're still wanting to have the outgoing as the 5 a.m. to 10 p.m, is that correct?
We'd still like to have outgoing 24 hours a day.
Right.
As I said earlier, we'd like to be able to do that, to be able to meet the requirements of the business in relation to the fact that we have 108 tonne of storage, which we have to use for our breeder production, and hence our manufacturing process would be is we start at 10 o'clock at night. We need to start emptying that out at 2 o'clock in the morning.
Okay. Yes.
Incoming, definitely between 6 and 6.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
Supplementary question if I could. Mr Fisher, how's the organisation been operating for the last 24 years?
There has been no limitation that we were aware of, and we've been operating 24/7 on and off throughout that period of 24 years since we took over the business in 1995. It was operating prior to that. I don't know what was being done there, but on and off we've been operating 24/7.
Okay. Councillor Von Hoff.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Through you. Thank you, Mr Fisher, for your presentation. Thank you also, Mr May, for your presentation. Following on Councillor McDonald's question, so am I correct in saying then that for some time there were compliance issues with Ridley? They were not being compliant with by running 24/7?
I think this is, as Peter said earlier, it is a very complex situation with this, the approval process with this business. So honestly, I can't answer that question.
You don't know if the company was compliant or not?
I can't answer that question, I'm sorry. All I know is that at the time, the business has been operating from time to time 24 hours a day. I'm not sure, again, due to the complexities of this situation, whether that was compliant or not.
Councillor Bonham, we might have a answer or something from Peter here. Yeah.
So just something that wasn't mentioned in my presentation. There is an environmental authority licence that is issued over this site, issued by Clifton Shire Council in 2004, I believe. Off the top of my head, sorry. A lot of things have gone my brain since then. But environmental authority licence, and that is issued over this site by Clifton Shire Council. It does contain conditions relating to the environmental impacts of the use, and it was pet food processing and grain processing, the environmental authority licence is for. Those conditions, let's just say we probably wouldn't impose conditions like that today. The condition in relation to noise simply states that noise from the activity must not be excessive. It's not definite. It doesn't provide any certainty for the applicant or council. And I think if anybody were to look at that condition today, what is excessive, you would refer to the Environmental Protection Act and the associated acoustic quality objectives in the noise policy. And as shown in the material submitted by the applicant during the development application, noise from the activity is exceeding those acoustic quality objectives.
Did you have a follow-up, Councillor Bonham?
I do actually, just through you, Madam Chair, for Mr Fisher, could you just clarify the employment numbers, please, for me again? You were saying 14 local employees and then an additional number of truck drivers, is that correct?
Not directly employed by Ridley, but yeah, there are 12 truck drivers who service the site.
And are they, sorry, supplementary if I might, are they Clifton and surrounds locals?
Yes, they are.
Thank you.
Councillor Carol Taylor?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you to Peter, the environmental licence, did that have any hours or restrictions on it, and did it and does it have to be renewed? Does it lapse because there's a new application in? Normally, if there's any sort of an extension or changes to those development, they need to get a new environmental licence, and that's my understanding.
Yeah. So at the time, this activity was what's considered an environmentally relevant activity under the Environmental Protection Act. It's no longer considered an environmentally relevant activity. However, the conditions of that approval issued by Clifton Shire Council tie to the land. They're tied to the land, they're enforceable at this very minute, and they will continue to be enforceable. The development approval will sit alongside or over it, however you wish to be, but they'll both regulate the use to some degree.
Okay, councillors, if that's the end of the discussion, one more for Councillor Vonhoff.
Sorry, thank you, Madam Chair. Through you to Peter, if I might. Peter, at 600 tonnes, am I correct in saying that the majority of the trucks, or maybe all of the trucks, come up William Street and then through the centre of the town before they go back onto the highway? Is that the general route?
If we could go to attachment 1. So, it's not on here, sorry, but the majority, if not all of the trucks, and B-double route shouldn't be, B-double shouldn't be using any other route. The B-double route is all of King Street here, and King Street goes up to an intersection up here, and you turn right, and the B-double route continues on the main road out of town. As I stated earlier, the approved BW route, probably historically from the lot reconfigurations at the time, actually continues down King Street, along Margaret Street here, and up up into the site. That's the approved B double route, yeah.
Councillor Carotella.
Thank you. My concern, and I've mentioned it before, we've got a conflict which is only going to get worse. I know this is it's historical and it's existing, but the people who have land around there that has been zoned low to medium residential, there's going to be a conflict in the future should there be any reasonable development in that area in Clifton, isn't there?
So should there be development on that land to the east that is within the low-medium density regional residential precinct, it'll be assessed against the relevant assessment benchmarks in the planning scheme. And there are assessment benchmarks in the planning scheme that relate to proposing sensitive land uses near existing uses that may have off-site impacts. So those impacts or that conflict would be assessed at that time and appropriately mitigated if there is a conflict.
Could involve building regulations.
I would also say there's an act, well, depends what you consider active, but it's an active rail line for the purposes of assessment there. So it's a transport noise corridor, designated transport noise corridor.
I lived near a railway line for 30 years and right near it, just with a road between us, and you actually get used to the trains. But
Councillor Carlin, do you have a further question?
Yeah, Peter, through you, Chair. You raised two questions, if I may. Am I to understand then that because in 10 or 15 years' time, Clifton could very well see development with proposed future networks servicing that area and as a major town centre, am I to understand that future adjacent development in that residential area would have to jump through hoops given the imposition of noise operating hours of the current applicant here before us?
Well, yeah, so...
I think the answer is yes.
That's fine. That's a good enough answer.
Well, there's a couple of... If in 15 years, well, if the development approval is enacted and the conditions of development approval are complied with, there may not be a conflict.
No, but what I'm driving at there is because of the conflicting land uses we already have now, those problems become greater and in fact exponential as population increases, and we see classic examples of that all over this region and other regions. But my question to the applicant is, we've heard here that under the old legislation, old regulations, there was a somewhat grey description of conformance to the Environmental Act. Under the new assessment, one would refer to the current legislation around that. How do you propose to deal with those constraints placed on you when that is referred to? If there are noise complaints, how would you comply with the noise, both on-site and off-site generated by the trucks to and from your site?
Okay,
You're right, Mr Fisher. Do you understand the question?
look, the process is that we understand, as I said earlier, there is work to be done on that site to comply with the conditions of the development application. We have 3 years to be able to do that, and we've already commenced work on site to address those issues. To come down to specifics as to what would be done, there is avenues for complaint management and so forth in the processes moving forward and as part of the DA. So,
yeah, no, I'm specifically referring to the request for 24/7 operation, increased tonnage, and how would you propose to deal with the noise? It's not so much on site, it's to and from the site, how would you propose to deal with that noise? Because if I'm interpreting the officer correctly here, you would not already comply with those noise restrictions and environmental impacts now, let alone with your request for 24/7.
I don't 100% agree with what you're saying. We're as I said previously, we're operating 24 hours a day now. We're not asking for an increase in what we're currently doing. The conditions of operating B doubles on that route are allowable. What this DA application is about, the noise generated on site in the vicinity of the site. And that's what we're planning to address.
I might just get the planner to respond to that. Thank you.
So, given the information in the development application that regarded the acoustic impact of the use, it's considered that the 24-hour vehicle movements, that it would prohibit the operator from achieving compliance with the conditions of approval, specifically those conditions that relate to the noise limits for the use. Put simply, the only way to stop the truck noise at certain times of the day is stop the trucks.
Thank you.
Okay. Can I, sorry, Councillor McDonald.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Just taking on Mr Swan's comments there in regard to the opinion that the organisation won't be able to meet the environmental needs or requirements on a 24-hour operation. A question then, I guess, to Mr Fisher is around the suggestion of the hours of incoming and then the outgoing being the full 24 hours, the outgoing, and the impact that may have on the operation, the customers, and the workforce, based on the fact that it's a change to what you're currently doing. And it's a juggling act, I understand that, but if your answer would include something around mitigation of noise and complying with environment, it would probably get a listening ear from me, as opposed to what I've heard, which is a suggestion that it can't be achieved. So understanding what you're currently doing and working out, if you were to keep that, how then could you mitigate over that 3-year period of time? How can you mitigate that as opposed to not complying?
Totally understand your question. The ways of managing our business are, and I suppose a few facts. We currently manufacture 30 tonne of product an hour. Is our manufacturing capacity, maximum manufacturing capacity within that business. A B double load of finished feed going out is 42 tonne. So what we can say now is that if we limit all of our incoming product to the hours of 6 a.m. to 6 p.m, and then we limit the outgoing trucks to 1 B double movement every hour, compared to what we've had in the past of a full suite of opportunity over those hours. That is something that is possible that we would be able to implement over the period to try and mitigate the amount of truck movements outside of the hours that were proposed in the DA. There are other ways that we can do it also, which we can investigate, and that is looking at ways for further, as was said previously, with further storage capability on site to allow us to manufacture for a longer period of time before the need is there for trucks to be on site. There are things that we can look at and try and implement over the 3-year period. As I said, it needs to be economically viable for the business to do that.
And one final question in regard to the infrastructure, King Street, the Verge, the works there, the suggestion for pushing that out from the application or the approval of 9 months to 3 years. And I understand that's based on what you've said more about the spreading of costs over perhaps a 2 or 3 year period. And I guess I'm trying to weigh up the pros and cons of opening hours, impact and workload to be able to achieve that, rather than taking aside the cost, how do you propose to actually achieve that if you've got movements, and you say you want 24-hour movements going out, how can you possibly do roadworks if that's happening over 24 hours at the same time?
And that's a very correct statement. As we said, from a financial point of view, being able to spread the costs associated with the development application approval, but also logistically. In number one at the moment with the difficulty in getting contractors, but also we aren't a new development. As I said earlier, I think if we were a new development, we'd still have difficulty in being able to achieve the requirements in that 9-month period. We are an operating business. We do operate 24/5, and our only avenues will be to do that work outside of those normal operating hours of the site. We don't have movements. There are other issues that we've got to deal with as well, and when we're talking about concrete and so forth, which has times where we can't actually go over it during that period for longer lengths of time, again, that is going to be logistically managed. It can be logistically managed, but not in the 9-month period that was put against the condition.
We may have exhausted all the discussion, so with that, could I have a mover that we reinstate standing orders? Councillor McDonald, Councillor O'Shea, those in favour, it's carried. Okay, so councillors, we have the recommendation before you that council approve in part change representations regarding the development approval. Can I have a mover for that, please? Sure.
Is there an alternate motion?
Does anyone have an alternate motion then? Councillor McDonald.
Alternate motion, Madam Chair, if I could, to test the appetite is for, Wendy, I haven't given you any information on this because I've just sort of worked this through as we've been talking, to be perfectly frank. Based on what we've heard, the infrastructure request, and I'll get to the point, was for 9 months. The suggestion was 3 years. I'd be comfortable to put forward in a motion that go to 18 months, which would then straddle 2 financial years, and take into account COVID period that we've had, given what we've heard today. So an 18-month period. Keeping in mind there's no change in conditions for the 3 years for noise and environmental noise and dust. So that would be one change to what the recommendation is, to go to 18 months. And maybe you test these separately for the time being, because the second one may not be as palatable as the first one.
Okay, so you're moving that...
Them as one once it's...
Okay. So you're moving that the applicant has an 18-month period to complete the roadworks?
Just through you, Madam Chair, I think it's condition 38. Mm-hmm. That's right.
38 and 39 relate to the roadworks, the frontage.
So from 9 months to 18 months.
Yeah.
Approval.
So do I have a seconder for that, Councillor Summerfield? So we're going to vote on these separately? Is that how this works as a novice?
Separately, if we could.
What about all the other changes?
Speak up.
What about all the other changes?
Yeah, we're just going to vote on...
Because we've got to vote on the whole, so we've got to have a whole...
Yeah,
well, you don't, isn't there only one motion?
Is that right?
Sorry?
Yeah, you'll be voting whether that's accepted as an amendment.
Okay.
And then if
Then
it
we're going
is,
to go.
that's fine, then we'll vote on the whole
Okay.
recommendation.
All right, so councillors, we're voting on this
Another
separately,
change
but
on
we
another-
might have other changes.
Sorry,
So,
Madam Chair, just clarification.
thank you.
I think it would be prudent for us to treat these conditions in isolation.
And then vote on the remainder.
May not be palatable each one.
Okay, sure. Okay, so the first alternative motion is that we're moving the time period from Councillor Carr.
Can we in fact do that? They're all part of the application. Can we in fact split them up like that?
I don't think we can.
Okay, process, I need some help.
It's one motion. They talk about the amendments.
Change, major change to the recommendations, therefore it could be considered a
An alternate.
allowable change, extended change under this application.
Okay, I'll seek advice here. Danielle?
Sorry, I'm not sure what the question is.
You're asking Councillor Carl whether we can separate them and vote on them separately as it's essentially changing the application.
We can separate conditions and vote on them separately, or they have to be all
That
as
would be a
one.
question for the CEO around meeting protocols.
So is the first motion that condition 38 be amended from the officer's recommendation to reflect a 18-month rather than a 9-month period? Is that correct?
Yep.
It's only condition 38, or is that 39 as well?
No, it's just condition 38.
38.
It's only 38?
In condition 38
Okay.
of the statement. That's with 18 months.
Just want to adjourn it, adjourn
Okay.
the meeting while we just get this recommendation right.
Okay, we're going to adjourn the meeting. Now, do we need a motion to
Motion
adjourn the
to
meeting?
adjourn.
Yes. Councillor McDonald, Councillor O'Shea. The meeting's adjourned while we get it one day. So from advice from the CEOs, we're going to suspend standing orders, discuss the possible alternative motions, and then vote on them
In one hit.
in one go. Okay, so can I have someone move that we suspend standing orders? Councillor Vonhoff and Councillor Carol Taylor. All those in favour? Okay.
Madam Chair, if that's the case, I'm happy to put that one up as an alternate motion. The second one relates to 1.2, I believe, which is around the hours of operation, and keeping in mind it's currently a 24-hour operation, and we're asking the group to deal with the noise and air environmental issues. These are the reasons, I guess, first. And secondly, around the works that have been imposed through these conditions of the extra infrastructure, and that is to have hours of incoming, 6 a.m. to 6 p.m, and 24-hour access to outgoing, which is what they currently have.
So
In fact,
condition 42.
42, is it?
43.1.
43.
3.1.
43.1? Thanks, Councillor Summerfield. 43.1.
Sorry, councillor, 6 a.m. to 6
6 a.m. to 6 p.m. incoming.
and outgoing.
Outgoing's 24 hours. The reasons for that, that's in capitals, Wendy, reasons for that are threefold. Firstly, that the operation has been running 24 hours. We've actually reduced the incoming traffic 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. Secondly, around the production of getting product out and meeting requirements of customers, and therefore employment of people and satisfying customer needs. And thirdly, the conditions we've placed around infrastructure work, flexibility to the organisation to do those works outside of the incoming works, because they can certainly control the outgoing through their production to ensure they comply with the condition of infrastructure.
Can we get a comment from an officer in relation?
Yeah, thanks, Councillor McDonald.
That's just...
Thank you.
Sorry, councillor, so I understood, as you indicated, that you were looking at 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. incoming and 24 hours for outgoing. I guess we would just raise a concern in relation to the 24 hours, as Peter indicated earlier. If you allow 24-hour for trucks leaving the site, there are other conditions in the approval which set acoustic quality objectives, and there's a very big likelihood, or a definite likelihood, that that will then create conflict with other requirements for meeting acoustic quality objectives in this approval. So there'll be a frustration of compliance, because if you've got trucks going out at 3 o'clock in the morning, there is no way they're going to meet the acoustic quality objectives which we've required them to meet.
Thank you. Could I just ask a question?
Yes. Yep.
I guess that was the nut of my question earlier on to the applicant in regard to that, and therefore whether it's a 3-year time frame to meet those environmental conditions or a 24-year time frame to meet those environmental conditions, under the current working arrangements, they wouldn't be able to meet that. So they're working for 3 years to mitigate that, and that was the question I asked the applicant in regard to, can they mitigate that with 24-hour operation, and they made comment. Now, whether that's true or not, I don't know, and that's where there's conflict between an assessment and mitigation. That's why I put that proposal forward. Are the conditions in there, through you, Madam Chair, through Danielle, conditions in there that spring to your mind that may be of great concern?
We're pointing out condition 44, which says, except where operating under an approved noise reduction program, noise from activity associated with the use of the subject land must not exceed the acoustic quality objectives listed in Schedule 1 of the Environmental Protection Noise Policy 2019 when measured at any sensitive receptor.
And 49. so this is
40, condition 49 relates to a proposed noise reduction program, which requires them to, instigate a whole range of measures over time to seek to meet those acoustic quality objectives. So that's what we're indicating, that if they're allowed to bring trucks in or out, like it's much easier to attenuate impacts that are internalised to a building. Obviously, trucks out on a road, in an open road, it's very difficult. If the truck's there, and it's making whatever noise it's making. And as we've indicated, we believe that if a truck's coming in at 3 o'clock in the morning, or going out, I should say, they're going to offend condition 44, and there's probably going to be issues with condition 49, so we end up with a conflict.
Okay, it's just surprising that the applicant would suggest that they can meet those requirements. I find that.
I don't know if I could be wrong, but I don't know if the applicant indicated that they could meet those acoustic quality objectives if they've got trucks coming out of the site 24 hours a day. I personally, I'm not an environmental scientist, but I don't honestly see how they would achieve these objectives.
Okay, thank you.
Madam Chair, I don't believe we've suspended standing orders. We've just voted to actually reinstate the meeting. So if we're going to have these discussions, I actually think this is
Councillor Taylor, we have suspended standing orders so that we could go back and have a discussion on the advice from the CEO.
Well, I would say that I think that this has descended into farce, to be honest. I will say that I think the applicant has come back. They've had despite the fact, look, the approval that was given to them by the previous council took into account the operation of the business and the number of people that they employed, and the amenity. We've got to balance that, and I believe the approval that was given did balance the amenity of the neighbours with the operation of the business and the employment and economic boost that it gives to the community of Clifton. The applicant has stated already that more storage would or may fill the void on the site. And I have to say, in today's environment, approval like this wouldn't be given with the housing that's close to there like that. And we have to recognise, it has been recognised by the approval that was given by the previous council, that this was operating. It's a very unusual situation where it was operating and thinking that they were right and they weren't. So I think that, I mean, we've got what has been asked for was an increase in the number of tonnes that they could process there, and the actual relaxation of the time for them to do the works that were requested, and a change to the hours. It wasn't asked for them to have 24 hours. So I think that we need to be having a look at what the applicants asked for.
Excuse me, it was asked for 24 hours. If I could just confirm that.
Yes, that's correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
Councillor Carl.
Well, this is the way I see it. We can't knowingly approve this amendment of 24 hours when professional advice from our officers says they can't hope to meet the current relevant legislative requirements around noise. That would then see this council in a position that wouldn't be viewed very favourably, given the advice and recommendation of the officers quite clearly saying that they won't be able to meet this particular part, this particular amendment of 24/7 outgoing vehicles.
Well, Councillor Summerfield.
Thank you. I don't believe that we should be changing the hours to 24/7 at all, and I have to say I always try and put myself in the position of people who may be around any of the applications that come before us, and when it was mentioned that we'd put one truck out an hour, my thought was, oh my gosh, I would have just got back to sleep. So I don't believe that that's the sort of solution we can be coming up with. I think we need to restrict the hours to hours that are amenable to the people that have to live around that noise, and I'm not keen to see the 24/7 at all for the outgoing, or for any of it.
Okay, thank you. So...
Confirmation,
yes.
24 hours, 5 days a week, I think was the call. However, given the information that the officers have provided, and agree totally with Councillor Carl, we need reasons and good reasons for that to be approved, to go down that path of 5 days, 24 hours a day for outgoing. And the reasons I gave earlier were reasons that I thought were valid, but if there is no way that those mitigation measures could be met, it's probably very difficult to support that. So that being the case, then I'm happy to remove it and go back to 5 a.m. to 10 p.m. As we've got in the officer's recommendation.
Okay.
I wanted to test it though, because I heard different things in the room this afternoon.
Okay. So you're happy to delete that then?
Happy to delete that and leave the first
time frame?
18 months.
Okay. So are there any other possible alternative motions, amendments? Councillor Carl.
I just flagged that if this amendment to the officer's recommendation here isn't successful, that I would move a motion as per the officer's original recommendation.
Okay. Are you happy to do that when we come out of...
9 months, 5 to 10 a.m, as per the report.
5 a.m. to 10 p.m, yeah. Okay. Okay, if there's no further discussion, then can I have someone move that we suspend standing orders? Reinstate standing orders. I'll get the language right one day. Councillor Antonio, Councillor Von Hoff, all those in favour? Okay. So, at this stage...
I'm happy to move.
And can I ask Councillor McDonald, that's with that minor amendment?
Beg your pardon, Mr Mayor?
With that minor amendment?
It's with that minor amendment to...
So you're happy to move the recommendation
18 months.
from the officers with the amendment?
With the amendment, and for the reasons...
38, as up on the screen. Thank you.
Reasons that were stated earlier, and I don't know if you need those reasons again.
Did you get those reasons?
Reasons were around the time frame to deliver it due to COVID-19 and spreading the financial responsibility as a result of that over 2 financial years.
Okay. So the recommendation is before you. We have had a mover and a seconder. All those in favour?
Sorry, who moved?
Second on that one.
Sorry, Councillor McDonald moved.
Who seconded?
No one seconded, I don't think.
Seconded originally before we went into...
We'll take
Okay, you happy to second it this time? Okay, we'll go back. All those in favour? Those against? Councillor Carl, would you like your vote recorded?
Carried.
Okay. Okay, carried. So that brings the meeting to a close. I apologise, councillors, for my probably not keeping it as tight as I can. I'm just new. I'm just learning. I'll tighten it up next time.
I apologise.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone, for your discussion.
Well done.
Thank you.